We sold our souls for cheap goods. Man, I'm reading this book by, I think his name's Steve Hahn, H-A-H-N. I'm not sure if it's Steve Hahn, because I think it's like a Catholic guy, but it's a guy who is called The Rise of Populism in the South. At first it was kind of boring, it's like, but now it's very, very interesting, because he's talking about the postbellum time after the Civil War. And he uses a couple of counties upcountry in Georgia. And I'm going through one right now because I go pick up Chloe. So at Athens, you got to go through Jackson County. And the county seat of Jackson County is Jefferson. And so Hahn, I just can't remember his first name. I think he's like from Harvard or Yale or some stupid school like that. But it's a great book. There's so many footnotes. Dude, Nassim Nicholas Taleb talks about the anti-library. What that means is every book you read, you add 10 more to your collection. I do this 100%, man. This guy's got so many footnotes in there. I'm like, oh, I got to get that book, got to get that book, got to get that PDF, got to get that PDF. And it's just amazing. And it's funny because it's fantastic. I love it. I love reading like this. I got to live near a university. We got a library because I love it, man. Anyway, so the point being is he was citing in 1880 or something like that, Jefferson, which is a county seat of Jackson County, Georgia, which I'm getting ready to go through here in about 10 minutes, sold about $40,000 of general merchandise. 4 years later, it sold, $300,000 of general merchandise. Why? Because they put a railroad stop in there. All right. So what was happening back then is the local artisans were being put out, being basically closed out, because we're able to buy cheaper goods from the West, essentially. So other than carpenters, blacksmiths, and one other thing, I forgot what it was, many, many local artisans were losing their business. And I know we think artisan, we're thinking like, bread. Artisan was just a yeoman guy who makes shoes, cobbler, that's an artisan. And a lot of these artisans were put out because we're getting cheaper goods from the West, delivered via railroad. And I said, man, how much does that sound like the big box stores and everything? Through international globalism. It's the same thing, dude. It's the same thing. We've been buying for cheap goods on the back of cheap labor, stuff that puts out our own people, our own working people. And then what happens now is, you don't want to have railroads and free trade and all that? Well, then what happens now is we, instead of having all that, the cheap goods from these foreign countries where the cheap labor is kept in Japan and China and Thailand and stuff, now we're saying, screw that, let's just import everybody. So now we got cheap labor here that's putting out our local artisans, our roofers, our electricians and things like that. Oh, Josh, there's no more, electricians are in high demand. Yeah, I get it. But a lot of electricians, a lot of these Spanish guys can do electricity stuff. Now, is it good? I don't know. I mean, I'm telling you, man, do not be so hesitant or so quick to say, plumbers and electricians will always have work. When these guys, I'm stuck behind some stupid truck. When these Spanish guys, and nothing wrong, I get it. They want to come here and make money. I 100% get it. They want to learn a skill that I don't have. I get it 100%. But the question, I don't blame them at all. The question is, why do we let them in? And they've always been saying, we need these cheap laborers because we don't have enough nurses. We don't have enough doctors. We're going to say we don't have enough electricians, so we got to let these people in. They've been saying that for years and years and years. So it used to be we buy cheap goods from Japan and China. And now we just say, from the slave labor, essentially, cheap labor. Now we say, let's just import the cheap labor so we don't even have to ship it. We can just make the cheap goods here and then have them do the services too. Because you got goods and services. Basically, goods are what we import from China, Japan, all that. But then you got the services, the electricians, the financial planners, all this stuff. And now we're just saying, man, the services industry hasn't taken on the hit nearly to the extent the goods industry has. And the goods industry, again, is where the artisans were, building products, making stuff a little bit more expensive. And you're like, no, I don't want those T-shirts made from you, local guy in South Carolina. I want T-shirts made from Japan, not Japan, but Thailand or something like that, or Philippines. I don't have to pay anything for. And we've all done it. I do it too. I mean, look at this T-shirt. I guarantee it wasn't made in the United States. And as such, it's kind of like we've just sold our soul. We sold our artisan shops, and now we're basically relying on more and more, just like they did back in the old days, of what's called merchant class. The merchant class back then was they didn't produce anything. they just said, hey, they're basically wholesalers. They're wholesalers that sell on retail. And what they do is they say, okay, the railroad truck comes in, we're going to take the, the freaking cotton that's grown someplace else. We'll pay wholesale, we'll sell it retail. We're going to take the chickens, we'll take whatever it is. And I mean, it's very interesting what this guy was saying. And we're going to consolidate in this one shop, a merchant shop. Oh, and by the way, the merchants became the biggest lenders that there were. So the merchant classes became like 70% of all lending went to the merchant class. Whereas previously, so in the antebellum years, artisans lent to each other, by barter, by a homogenous, high trust society where they said, no, I'm the guy who raises the horses, you're the guy who makes the steel, we're gonna trade with each other. And now it's all done by merchants on credit, and the interest rate on credit was through the roof and all that. It's just crazy, and all because of cheap goods. All because of cheap goods. People want to pay cheap goods, and they're willing to sacrifice their own for cheap goods. It's amazing, and we all fall for it because we're like, oh man, I get that toilet paper for cheap. I don't want to buy a local guy, and now your local guy's put out of business, and now your local guy works at the big box store, and now we all gripe and say there's not enough local artisans anymore. Yeah, because you put them all out. And now your local guy who did the roofing got priced out because of cheap labor from illegals. You're like, oh man, I'd like to hire an American. You can't, because they're all out because they can't afford to compete with the cheap labor. And cheap labor means cheap goods, cheap services as well. And it's amazing how this has been put on us. The funny thing is hearing the merchants now get driven out, because remember the merchant class in the postbellum time were basically the Walmarts of that era, but now they've been driven out by the big box stores. The Ace franchises and stuff are being driven out by Lowe's and Home Depot. Never mind the local artisan who did the woodwork, not the woodworking, but you know what I'm saying, the hardware stores done by local guys. They're being driven out because the big box stores who can do it for cheap, economies of scale. And so the old merchants who ran the roost are now being put out for the last 40 years by big box stores. And now we're all like, man, we should take care of our local merchants. And you're like, well, yeah, but those are the guys who put out the artisans to begin with. It's just all because of cheap goods. Yeah, it's very interesting. And, at the end of the day, we have all kinds of excess spending. But then you look at, too, the rise or the lack of independent small business organization, going back to, I think the census I was looking at, see Jefferson right there, 11 miles away. Greenville, South Carolina, 99 miles away. But the lack of startups of small business, what I'm saying is less than 50 people. I mean, the number of startups since 1978 or something like that, I was looking back at the Census Bureau data, it's gone up since then, but not much, not relative to the population as a whole. It's just like then, back in the old days, the postbellum, the Civil War time, the number of artisans went down because the merchants took over, and because they got cheap goods from foreign places, in this case the West. And now the number of the small independent shops are not growing to the extent that the population is, because most people are working for large companies, big box stores, big corporations, and it's monopolization, man. International conglomerates, monopolization. At the end of the day, it's just they're going to take over, and then you're going to be stuck with. You'll be stuck with one company that you can do your banking on, one company you can do your hardware stuff on, one company that you can do your freaking anything on. Is I don't know. Anyway, the point is, frequent your local artisans as much as you can, especially if they're raising food that you need. Pay a little bit more for locally raised eggs, meat. Pay a little bit more for various things that you can get from your local artisan. Good. I'm a hypocrite, I grant you, but because we got to stop the flow of international globalism just taking over, because it's not good for a culture. All right, God bless. We'll see you.